Every single morning, without realizing it, millions of people over 60 do something in the first 20 seconds of waking up that quietly puts their heart under more stress than a brisk 10-minute walk. It is not eating the wrong food. It is not skipping medication. It is not stress or smoking or any of the things that appear on standard health checklists. It is something so ordinary, so automatic, so deeply wired into your daily routine that you have never once thought of it as dangerous. And the reason your doctor has probably never warned you about it is not negligence. It is because the average medical appointment does not have the time to cover what happens in the first 30 seconds of your morning. But those 30 seconds, depending on your age and what medications you are taking, may be the most cardiovascularly dangerous 30 seconds of your entire day. And I can prove it. Let me ask you something before we go any further. Have you ever stood up from bed in the morning and felt a sudden rush of darkness at the edges of your vision? A brief moment where the room tilted slightly and you had to grab something, the wall, the nightstand, the doorframe, just for a second before everything steadied? And did you write it off as being groggy, as just what mornings feel like now? What if I told you that what you felt in that moment was your brain briefly losing blood supply? Not dramatically, not enough to cause obvious harm, but enough that your body was sending you a warning signal that almost no one teaches you to recognize. And what if I told you that for some people, that same moment, that same 30-second window, that same morning habit done one time too many, ends with them on the bathroom floor with no memory of how they got there? This is not a scare tactic. This is what the science actually shows. And by the time this video ends, you will never look at your morning routine the same way again. Before we go any further, drop your age in the comments right now and tell us where in the world you are watching from. We are building this community together, and we are close to our first 1,000 subscribers. Every single comment helps more people find this information. And trust me, after what you are about to learn, you will want the people you love to find it too. Now let me tell you about a woman I'll call Patricia. She was 68 years old, a retired school teacher. She had managed her blood pressure with medication for 6 years without a single serious incident. Her checkups were steady, her lifestyle was careful. She walked every morning after breakfast, she slept well, and she considered herself, by any measure, a well-managed patient. One morning in early spring, she stood up from bed the way she always did. Quickly, efficiently, she had things to do. And before she reached the bathroom door, the walls closed in around her, her knees gave out, and she was on the floor. No warning, no dizziness first, just gone, and then the cold floor tile against her face. When the paramedics arrived, her heart rhythm was fine. Her blood work came back clean, and she was sent home the next day with a sheet of general guidelines and a follow-up appointment 2 weeks away. Nobody, not the ER physician, not the admitting nurse, not the discharge coordinator, asked her one specific question. How quickly do you stand up in the morning? That question, had anyone thought to ask it, would have changed everything about how her case was handled. Because what happened to Patricia was not a mystery. It was entirely predictable. And it is happening to people in every city, in every country, in every age group over 60, every single morning. And the science behind why it happens is something every single person watching this needs to understand before tonight. Here is what is actually going on inside your body during those first seconds after you wake up. When you are lying down, your heart has an easy job. Blood flows with relatively little gravitational resistance. Your vessels are relaxed. Your blood pressure is at or near its lowest point of the entire day. That is normal and healthy. The problem begins the moment you decide to go vertical. The instant you stand, gravity pulls a significant volume of blood, research suggests somewhere between 1/4 and 3/4 of a liter, downward into the vessels of your legs and lower abdomen. Your brain, suddenly receiving less blood than it needs, sends a rapid distress signal to your nervous system. The autonomic nervous system, which is the part of your body that controls involuntary functions like blood pressure regulation, is supposed to respond by tightening the blood vessels in your legs and slightly accelerating your heart rate. In a healthy young adult, this reflex fires in under 2 seconds. You never even feel it. But here is the crucial part. Research published in journals focused on aging and cardiovascular physiology has consistently shown that this autonomic reflex slows down with age. Not dramatically, quietly, gradually. The reflex is still there, but instead of firing in 1 or 2 seconds, it now takes 3, 4, sometimes 5 seconds to fully engage. And in that gap, that 3 to 5 second window between standing and your body catching up, that is where everything dangerous lives. That is where dizziness happens. That is where falls happen. And in someone with an underlying cardiovascular condition, that is where far more serious events can be triggered. Physicians call this orthostatic hypotension, and studies have found it affects roughly 1 in every 4 or 5 adults over the age of 65. 1 in 4. This is not a rare edge case. This is an incredibly common condition that is simply not getting the attention it deserves. Now I want you to understand why mornings are specifically dangerous, because this is not random. Your body runs on a 24-hour biological clock, and your cardiovascular system follows that rhythm precisely. In the hours just after waking, typically between 6 and 10 in the morning, your body releases a surge of stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol to shift you from sleep to wakefulness. At the same time, your blood becomes temporarily more prone to clotting, a natural morning phenomenon that has been well documented in cardiovascular research. Blood pressure also tends to rise sharply in this window as part of the normal wake-up process. The result is that this morning period carries the highest measured rates of cardiac events, strokes, and dangerous blood pressure fluctuations of any time in the entire day. You are most vulnerable, biologically, in the first hour after waking, and that is exactly the moment when most people leap out of bed and begin rushing through their morning without a second thought. Add a third factor on top of this, and the picture becomes even more serious. Most people over 60 wake up mildly dehydrated and don't realize it. The body's thirst signaling mechanism, which is controlled by a part of the brain called the hypothalamus, becomes measurably less sensitive as we age. Studies in geriatric medicine have shown that older adults consistently underestimate their fluid needs and frequently wake up in a state of mild to moderate dehydration after a full night's sleep, especially if they limit evening fluids to avoid waking up for the bathroom. When you are even mildly dehydrated, your blood volume drops slightly. Your blood becomes marginally thicker. Your cardiovascular system has less fluid to work with at the exact moment it is being asked to maintain pressure against the sudden challenge of standing upright. It is like trying to pump water through a system that is already running low. The pressure drops faster and recovers more slowly. And now add the fourth factor, the one that is perhaps the most overlooked of all. Many people who take blood pressure or heart medications take them in the evening or at bedtime. Medications have what pharmacologists call a trough period, which is the window of time when the drug's concentration in your bloodstream is at its lowest, providing the least protection. For someone taking their medication the night before, that trough period frequently falls in the early morning hours, which means the window when your medication is working least effectively is the exact same window when your heart is under the most biological stress. A body of research in a field called chronopharmacology, which studies how medication timing interacts with your body's natural rhythms, has found meaningful evidence that timing matters significantly, especially in older adults on cardiovascular medications. This is a conversation worth having with your pharmacist or physician, and I will come back to that. So let me pull this all together. Patricia had all of these factors working against her simultaneously. Her autonomic reflex was slower than it had been at 40. Her morning cardiovascular vulnerability window was fully open. She was mildly dehydrated from a careful evening of limiting fluids. Her medication was at its lowest concentration. And she stood up fast, the way she had for 50 years, because her body had never given her a reason not to, until it did. And the terrible and important truth is that Patricia's fall was not an accident in the way we commonly think of accidents. It was a predictable outcome of a combination of well-understood physiological factors that had simply never been explained to her. The information existed, the research existed, The conversation had just never happened. I want to tell you about another person, a man I'll call Vincent. He was 74 years old, a retired engineer, methodical and skeptical by nature. He had been experiencing brief moments of dizziness every morning for about 14 months before he mentioned it to anyone. He had filed it under getting older and moved on. What changed things for Vincent was not a dramatic fall. It was a casual conversation with his pharmacist during a routine refill visit. The pharmacist asked a few routine questions and then paused on one answer Vincent gave about his morning routine. That pharmacist's instinct led to a referral, which led to a diagnosis of clinically significant orthostatic hypotension that had been silently present and completely undetected for over a year. Vincent told me later that he had seen 3 different doctors in those 14 months, and not one of them had asked him about how he felt when he first stood up in the morning. He didn't blame them. There is genuinely more to cover in a modern medical appointment than time allows. But he was frustrated that a condition with such clear, manageable solutions had gone unaddressed for so long simply because the question had never been asked. And then there is the quieter version of this story, the one that never makes it to a hospital at all. This is the person who grabs the door frame every morning and blames it on being groggy. The one who sits back down on the bed for a moment before their legs feel steady and tells themselves it happens to everyone. The one who has learned to pause at the bathroom sink for a few seconds without ever consciously deciding to do so because their body figured out what their doctor never told them. Research suggests that many people adapt to mild orthostatic hypotension over time without ever receiving a diagnosis, and some studies have indicated that even these repeated subclinical episodes, the ones that don't cause a fall, are associated over years with increased cardiovascular risk and measurable effects on cognitive function. This is not something to quietly adapt around, it is something to address. Here is the morning protocol that is backed by real physiology and is used in geriatric cardiology settings around the world. It takes under 3 minutes and costs nothing. The first thing to do, before you even move the covers, is to spend about 30 seconds activating your calf muscles. Rotate your ankles slowly in circles, flex your feet up toward you, and then point them away. Repeat this several times. The calves are sometimes called the second heart because they act as a muscular pump for venous blood in the lower body. Activating them before you stand means less blood pooling downward when gravity hits. This simple step directly reduces the severity of the blood pressure drop that causes dizziness. Second, keep water on your nightstand every single night and drink at least a full glass before you stand up, not after you reach the kitchen, before you stand. Drinking water first thing in the morning triggers a physiological response that measurably raises blood pressure within about 10 minutes, a phenomenon researchers have studied specifically in patients with orthostatic conditions. More practically, it begins to restore blood volume before you challenge your system with an upright posture. This one habit alone has made a demonstrable difference for many patients with morning cardiovascular symptoms. Third, do not go from lying to standing in one motion. Sit on the edge of your bed first and stay there for a full 60 seconds, not 5 seconds, 60. Use your phone timer if you need to. Sitting is an intermediate cardiovascular position. Your body is adjusting to partial gravitational load, which gives the autonomic nervous system time to begin its compensatory work before you go fully vertical. This staged transition is one of the most consistently effective non-pharmacological interventions for orthostatic hypotension studied in aging populations. It feels like doing nothing. It is actually doing a great deal. Fourth, when you do stand, stand next to something solid, your nightstand, a bedpost, a wall. Keep your hand on it for the first several seconds, not because you expect to fall, but because you are creating a safety margin during the window when your blood pressure is still adjusting. This is not a sign of fragility. It is intelligent management of a known physiological risk. Fifth, have a specific conversation with your pharmacist at your next refill visit. Ask them this directly. Given the medications I'm currently taking, is there a timing during the day that would be safest for my morning cardiovascular risk? Your pharmacist has access to your complete medication list, understands peak and trough pharmacokinetics, and is genuinely underutilized as a resource for this kind of personalized guidance. This conversation is free, takes 5 minutes, and could be among the most valuable health discussions you have this year. Sixth, begin tracking your morning blood pressure at home. Sit quietly for 5 minutes first, then measure and record the number in a notebook or your phone. Bring that log to your next medical appointment along with one specific request. Ask your doctor to perform an orthostatic blood pressure measurement. The test involves measuring your blood pressure while you are lying down, then again 1 minute after standing, and again at 3 minutes. It takes less than 3 minutes to perform and directly tells your doctor whether you have clinically significant orthostatic hypotension. Many patients have never had this test done. You now know to ask for it by name. Seventh, and perhaps most importantly, share what you have learned today with someone else, your partner, your parent, a friend who mentioned feeling lightheaded in the mornings. Because the gap between people who have this information and people who don't is not a medical gap, it is an information gap, and it is entirely closable. Let me come back to Patricia for a moment, because her story does not end on that bathroom floor. After her hospital visit, her daughter began asking her very specific questions about her morning routine, and searched until she found the research on orthostatic hypotension and morning cardiovascular risk. She printed out a summary and brought it to Patricia's follow-up appointment. Patricia's physician, a thorough and caring doctor who simply had not had the time to cover this in previous visits, immediately adjusted her medication timing, walked her through the morning protocol, and ordered orthostatic blood pressure measurements at every subsequent visit. Within 8 weeks, Patricia's morning dizziness was gone completely. She told her daughter afterward that she had been feeling slightly off in the mornings for almost 2 years and had never mentioned it because she assumed it was just what getting older felt like. It is not. It is a measurable, manageable physiological condition, and the only reason it went unaddressed for 2 years was that the right question had never been asked. You might be thinking right now that you have stood up quickly your whole life and nothing bad has ever happened, and that may be true. But consider this. The same action carries a meaningfully different risk profile at 65 than it did at 35. Your autonomic nervous system is slower. Your baseline hydration is lower. The probability that you are on a medication with cardiovascular effects is substantially higher, and the biological vulnerability of the morning hours remains constant regardless of how healthy you feel. The absence of a serious event so far is not evidence that the risk is not real. It is evidence that your body has been compensating, and compensation has limits. If you live with someone who is over 60 and on heart or blood pressure medication, your role in this matters more than you might realize. The falls and episodes that result from this kind of event are significantly more dangerous when a person is alone. If you have a parent, a partner, a neighbor in this situation, share this with them today, not sometime this week, today, because the morning they need this information might be tomorrow morning. The research is clear. The physiology is well understood. The solutions are simple, inexpensive, and effective. The only missing piece, consistently, is the conversation. And that is what today was for. If you are going to implement the morning protocol, leave the word protocol in the comments below. If you are going to ask your doctor for an orthostatic blood pressure test at your next visit, write that in the comments. And if there is one specific person you are going to share this with today, tell us about them. These comments matter. They create a record of awareness, and they help more people find this information through search. Subscribe if you haven't already. We are building toward 1,000 subscribers here, and every person who joins this community is someone who will have access to the kind of information that genuinely changes how people move through their days. Not frightening information, useful information. The kind that turns a silent, preventable risk into something you can walk away from every single morning. Take the 3 minutes tomorrow. Your morning has never been more worth the attention.